My boss laughed in my face when I asked for overtime pay. A few weeks later, he wasn't laughing anymore because the labor board was knocking on his door. I used to believe hard work would speak for itself. My first months at the company were a blur of glowing computer screens, endless phone calls, and the kind of, "can you just finish this before you go?" requests that stretched my evenings into nights. Everyone said it was normal. "Welcome to the corporate world," my coworkers joked as we grabbed vending machine snacks instead of dinner. I laughed with them, but inside I worried. Because my time card told a very different story, I was logging 10, sometimes 12 hours a day, Saturdays too. My friends stopped inviting me out because they knew I'd just decline. My mother complained she barely heard my voice anymore. And all for what? I assumed the extra pay would soften the sacrifice. After all, overtime is overtime. It's the law. But the first paycheck told me something was off. Hours missing. Entire weekends vanished from the records. At first, I thought maybe it was a clerical error. HR mistakes happen. But when I brought it up with the payroll assistant, she looked at me with the same tired eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. She whispered, "Talk to him directly. They'd never fix it otherwise." Him meant my boss, Mr. Carter, a man who carried himself like every minute he gave us was worth more than gold. His smile never reached his eyes. His office door was always half open, just enough to remind you he was listening. I knocked anyway. He didn't look up. "Yes? I think there's a mistake on my paycheck," I said carefully. "Some of my overtime hours are missing." Finally, he glanced at me, a smirk. "We don't do overtime here. Salaried employees are expected to contribute. You'll understand that as you grow in this company, it wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate." The words hit me like a slap. My hands felt hot, my chest heavy. I managed to nod and left before my voice betrayed me. But in the hallway, the weight of his words sank deeper. No overtime, yet he demanded it daily. No pay, yet he promised promotions if we proved our dedication. That night, I stared at my laptop. Emails from him blinking in bold, demanding more work, more reports, more late hours. For the first time, I didn't feel tired. I felt angry. Anger sharp enough to slice through exhaustion. Because maybe I was new, maybe I was inexperienced. But I wasn't naive. And if Mr. Carter thought I would quietly let him steal from me, he had no idea who he was dealing with. I began searching. Labor laws, employee rights, overtime pay regulations. The internet was a treasure chest of information. And what I found was clear. What he was doing wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. And maybe, just maybe, I had the power to do something about it. If you discovered your boss was stealing your overtime pay, would you confront them directly or start building evidence quietly? The next morning, the office buzzed with the same tired rhythm. Keyboards clicked, phones rang, and the smell of burnt coffee floated through the air. To anyone else, it was an ordinary Tuesday. But to me, everything felt different. I wasn't just a tired employee anymore. I was a quiet storm waiting to break. At lunch, I sat in the corner of the break room, scrolling through labor board case studies on my phone, stories of people who had been in situations just like mine, unpaid hours, overworked weekends, manipulative bosses. Some had lost their jobs after speaking up. Others had won massive settlements. The risk terrified me, but so did the idea of staying silent. "Looking seriouser," a voice said. It was Maya, one of the few coworkers I trusted. She slid into the chair across from me, balancing a container of salad and her usual half smile. "Just tired," I said, tucking my phone away. She raised an eyebrow. "Don't give me that. You've been working more than anyone. Let me guess, your paycheck didn't reflect it either?" My silence was enough. She sighed. "Thought so. None of us get paid for overtime. Carter says it's company policy, but you didn't hear that from me?" Her words landed heavy. None of us. Which meant this wasn't just my battle. It was systemic. A whole department drained dry by one man's greed. "Doesn't anyone fight back?" I asked, lowering my voice. Maya poked at her salad. "People tried. They either got pushed out or conveniently overlooked for promotions. Carter's good at making life hell for anyone who questions him. That's why most of us keep our heads down fear. That's what kept them quiet. And honestly, I understood it. Rent, loans, families. The cost of speaking up was high, but the cost of silence was higher. That night, I stayed late again. Not for Carter this time, but for myself. While he thought I was preparing his quarterly report, I was collecting copies of emails, screenshots of messages demanding weekend work, and time card records that didn't match reality. Every click of the mouse felt like rebellion. At one point, I nearly jumped when someone appeared at my cubicle. It was James, a quiet guy from accounting. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're keeping records, aren't you?" My heart pounded. "Why would you think that?" "Because I've been doing the same," he said, eyes darting around. "We all complain in private, but you look like you're planning something. If you are, don't stop. He's gotten away with this too long." Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me stunned. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. When I finally left the building, the city lights blurred in the night air, my phone heavy in my hand with folders of evidence. I knew this was only the beginning. Carter might think he owned us, but I was starting to see the cracks in his empire, and I was ready to widen them. If you were in Maya's or James's position, would you risk joining me in collecting evidence, or would you stay silent to protect yourself? By the end of the week, my secret folder had grown thick. Screenshots of time cards, copies of schedules, emails with Carter's bold demands in black and white. Every piece of data felt like a brick in the wall I was building against him. But Carter wasn't blind. He had a way of sensing shifts in the air like a predator sniffing fear. Friday afternoon, just as I was about to pack my bag, his office door swung open. "Emily," he called, his tone deceptively warm. A word? My stomach nodded. Inside, his office smelled of expensive cologne and power. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. I sat, forcing calm into my breathing. "You've been staying late," he said, tapping a pen on a neat stack of folders. "Impressive dedication. But I want to remind you, there's no need to track every single hour. We're a family here. We go above and beyond a family." The word curdled in my stomach. Families don't steal from each other. I nodded politely. Of course. His smile sharpened. Good. I wouldn't want you wasting energy on distractions. Focus on results. That's what gets noticed. The message was clear. He suspected. And he was warning me. When I left his office, my hands trembled. Part of me wanted to drop everything, delete the files, pretend I never cared. But then I remembered Maya's tired eyes, James's whispered encouragement. Carter wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from all of us. That weekend, I met Maya at a small cafe near the park. The hum of conversations around us felt safer than the sterile quiet of the office. I told her about Carter's words, his veiled threat. She leaned forward, her expression hardening. That's classic Carter, she said. He does that to everyone who gets too close to questioning him. He scared me off years ago. Then why are you still there? I asked. Because bills don't wait, she said simply. But if you're really doing this, if you're going after him, you won't be alone. People are watching. Some of us are tired of being scared. Her words lit a fire in me. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just my fight, it was bigger. If I backed down, I'd be proving Carter right. If I pushed forward, I might give others the courage to do the same. That night, I worked late again. But instead of hiding my trail, I got bolder. I printed key documents and kept them in a locked folder at home. I even started journaling my hours by hand, a physical log Carter couldn't alter. The risk gnawed at me, but so did the injustice. I knew he'd tighten his grip soon, maybe even try to set a trap. But fear only fueled my resolve. Because deep down, I sensed something. Carter thought he was untouchable. That arrogance would be his downfall, and I'd be the one to push him over the edge. If your boss hinted that he knew you were keeping records, would you back off to protect your job, or keep going even harder like I did? Monday morning hit like a storm. Carter was already pacing the floor before most of us had even clocked in, his sharp voice cutting through the office hum. He barked orders, demanded updates, and reminded us about the upcoming quarterly review. That review was his excuse to squeeze every last drop of energy out of us. By noon, I'd already logged 6 hours, none of which would count as overtime. My inbox flashed with a new message from him. Report needs revision. Stay late tonight. My jaw clenched. He didn't even ask anymore, he commanded. I glanced around the office. Maya typed quietly, avoiding his gaze. James hunched over spreadsheets, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion. We were all puppets on Carter's strings, and he pulled harder with every passing day. By 8 p.m., most of the floor was empty. I was still there, tapping furiously at my keyboard, not because I wanted to, but because I needed more evidence. The silence was broken by Carter's voice. He stood behind me, hands clasped, his smile cold. You're dedicated, Emily, he said. I like that. But don't burn yourself out. Remember, we don't recognize overtime here. Your value is in your loyalty. He lingered a second too long, like he was daring me to argue. My heart thumped, but I kept my face neutral. Of course, Mr. Carter. The moment he left, anger surged so strong I thought my hands would break the keyboard. Loyalty? That was just his word for obedience, for silence, for being exploited. When I finally shut down my computer, it was past 10. The elevator ride down felt endless. Outside, the city glowed under streetlights, but I didn't see beauty, only chains. I pulled out my phone and dialed the labor board hotline I had saved for weeks. My thumb hovered, trembling. Was I ready? Was I willing to risk everything? Before I could press call, a message popped up. It was from James. We need to talk. Tomorrow, important. The next day at lunch, we met in the parking garage. He handed me a flash drive, his eyes darting nervously. Payroll records, he whispered. I've been pulling them quietly. There are gaps everywhere. Hours vanish after being logged. If you're going to the board, this will matter. I stared at the drive in my hand, my pulse racing. James, this could get you fired. He gave a humorless laugh. I'm already on Carter's bad side. If I'm going down, I want him to go first. The drive felt heavy, not just with data, but with trust. This was no longer just my mission. People were risking themselves because they believed I could carry this through. That night, I didn't hesitate. I called the labor board. A calm voice answered, guiding me through the first steps of filing a formal complaint. When I hung up, my hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. Carter had pushed me to my breaking point. Now I was pushing back. Would you have made the call to the labor board at this stage? Or waited until you felt 100% untouchable? Filing the complaint felt like stepping onto a tightrope. The labor board officer I spoke to, Ms. Ramirez, assured me the process would be confidential. They would review the documents, cross-check payroll records, and, if the evidence was strong enough, launch an official investigation. Still, paranoia crept in. Every time Carter looked at me, I wondered if he knew. Every email from him felt sharper, more watchful. I had to keep my composure, smile at his empty jokes and nod at his motivational speeches, all while knowing a storm was brewing behind the scenes. The first week passed with no visible change. Then little things started happening. A man in a suit came by the office, introducing himself as a consultant, reviewing compliance procedures. HR suddenly sent out reminders about accurate timekeeping. Carter brushed it off as routine, but I caught the flicker of irritation in his eyes. Maya leaned over my desk one morning, her voice barely above a whisper. Something's happening, isn't it? I pretended not to understand. What do you mean? She gave me a look that pierced straight through me. You don't have to say it. Her concern warmed me, but it also fueled my resolve. If even Maya sensed a shift, then Carter's perfect empire was already wobbling. That night, I stayed later than usual. Not for work, but to print another round of documents. As I slipped papers into my folder, the office phone rang. It startled me. No one called this late. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. Emily? The voice was low, unfamiliar. Yes? You don't know me. But I know what you're doing. Be careful. Carter has friends in places you don't expect. The line went dead. I froze, the dial tone humming in my ear. My first instinct was to panic. Had someone discovered my complaint? Was this a threat? I packed my things fast, my chest tight, eyes darting at every shadow on my way out. At home, I locked the folder in my desk drawer and sat on the edge of my bed, replaying the words. Friends in places you don't expect. What did that even mean? Did Carter have someone inside the labor board? Was someone feeding him information? The next day, Carter called a team meeting. His voice was sharp, his smile fake. We've been informed there may be audits soon. I trust everyone has been diligent with their reporting. His gaze lingered on me a moment too long. My stomach twisted. He knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough to be suspicious. Still, when the meeting ended, James gave me a small nod across the room, subtle but steady. It reminded me why I couldn't back down. Carter could bluff, threaten, even scare me with mystery phone calls, but the truth was on my side. And truth, once exposed, is unstoppable. If you were in my shoes, how would you react to that late-night warning call? Ignore it or take it as a serious threat? By the start of the next week, subtle changes swept through the office like an invisible wind. Carter was quieter, more precise, almost restless. Emails became formal, orders less impulsive, as if he sensed someone or something was watching. The labor board had begun their preliminary review. I didn't get specifics, just small confirmations from Miss Ramirez that everything was moving along. Every file I had collected, every screenshot, every handwritten log now had a legal weight I could feel pressing against Carter's empire. Maya noticed it too. As we walked to the break room, she whispered, "He's off balance. Never seen him like this?" I smiled, but only slightly. "Good. Let's hope it lasts by Wednesday," whispers started circulating. HR suddenly held mandatory policy briefings on overtime and reporting procedures. Carter attended, but he was unusually tense. During one session, he glanced at me a few times, eyes narrowing. I kept my expression neutral, heart hammering. Then came the emails. Anonymous, factual, meticulously detailed. Copies of records I didn't even know existed. Payroll discrepancies highlighted. Names of other employees affected. Someone was helping me, and I had no clue who. James? Maya? Another colleague too cautious to speak? Whoever it was, the pressure on Carter was mounting, silently but irresistibly. That afternoon, he called me into his office. My stomach dropped, but I walked in, confident despite the storm in my chest. "Emily," he said, sitting rigid behind his desk. His hands were clasped tightly. "I've noticed your meticulousness." "Yes?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He leaned back. "It's admirable. But don't get carried away. Rules exist for a reason. I don't want mistakes. Or rumors." I nodded, careful not to smile. "Of course, Mr. Carter." After I left, I felt a thrill and a chill at the same time. He was trying to intimidate me, but the more he spoke, the more I realized he was cornered. A tiger pacing in a shrinking cage. That evening, I reviewed my files once again. New evidence, new emails, and notes from colleagues who had confided in me. Every detail added weight. Every hour of unpaid labor became a brick in the case we were quietly building. I wasn't naive. I knew Carter would fight back. Lawyers, HR loopholes, intimidation. But the labor board was a force he couldn't easily manipulate, and my evidence was airtight. As I left the office that night, city lights reflecting in the puddles from earlier rain, I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. The storm was coming, and I was ready to stand in it. At home, I locked my documents securely and poured myself a cup of tea. I let myself imagine the moment Carter would finally face consequences. The thought made my heart pound, not with anger, but with vindication. Because the truth has a way of finding its path, no matter how clever the liar. And Carter had underestimated me. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring the first ripples of real change. The labor board's shadow was growing longer, and he could feel it, though he didn't know how close the edge really was. If you were Emily, would you keep evidence at home where it's safe but accessible, or risk keeping it in the office to act faster? The next Monday, the tension in the office was electric. Carter moved through the floor like a storm cloud, his eyes scanning every desk, his voice clipped. Something had changed. I could feel it in the way staff avoided him, in the hushed whispers that flitted through cubicles like shadows. By late morning, HR called a mandatory meeting. We gathered in the conference room, the air thick with unease. Carter stood at the head of the table, his suit sharp, his posture rigid. But even in his polished exterior, I caught flickers of frustration, tiny cracks in his carefully constructed armor. "The company has been contacted regarding compliance concern," he began, his voice tight. "I expect full cooperation. Documentation must be accurate. Questions can be directed to me after the meeting." My pulse quickened. That was it. The labor board had reached him. The first strike. As everyone shuffled back to their desks, Carter lingered near mine, pretending to adjust something on his phone. I kept my eyes on my screen, pretending not to notice. By afternoon, the subtle pressure escalated. My emails were being monitored more closely. Requests for reports came faster, corrections more pointed. It was as if he was testing me, trying to see if I'd crack. But I didn't. I had practiced this game in my mind for weeks. I was ready for him. James slid into my cubicle, barely above a whisper. "They called him," he said, eyes darting nervously. "Carter thinks it's just routine. He doesn't know it's the labor board." Not yet, I nodded. "Good. Let him feel the pressure without realizing where it's coming from. The cracks will get bigger." Meanwhile, Maya kept watch too, her expression subtle but supportive. Every time Carter passed by, she would give me a small, almost imperceptible nod. We were a quiet network, invisible but formidable. That night, the office emptied faster than usual. I stayed behind, working on a timeline of all unpaid hours, cross-referencing emails and time cards. Each entry was proof, and proof was power. Each hour he had stolen would not be forgotten. As I left, the city lights reflected off the rain-slicked streets, painting everything in streaks of gold and silver. For a moment, I felt a surge of exhilaration. Carter had underestimated me at every turn. Now, the labor board was moving, silently but decisively, and there was nothing he could do to stop the tide that was rising against him. At home, I organized my files meticulously, every folder labeled, every document backed up, every email timestamped. I knew he would fight, maybe even try to intimidate me further, but the first strike had landed. The labor board's presence was like a shadow stretching across his office, silent but impossible to ignore. And in that shadow, I found confidence. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a powerless employee. I felt like someone with control, someone who could make the greedy, manipulative man behind the desk and answer for every stolen hour. Tomorrow, I told myself, the pressure would intensify, but I was ready. Every late night, every stolen hour, every whispered warning had led to this moment. And I wouldn't back down now. If you were Emily, would you confront Carter directly after knowing the labor board contacted him, or continue building evidence quietly? By midweek, Carter's composure was unraveling. The careful, polished demeanor he wore like armor began to crack, revealing the nervous tension beneath. Emails were sent and retracted, memos rushed out with errors, and staff noticed the subtle flicker of panic in his eyes whenever the labor board's presence was mentioned. Even indirectly, I watched from my desk, heart racing. This was the moment patience paid off. Every late night, every carefully logged hour, every discreet conversation had built to this. And now, the predator was cornered. Carter called me into his office without warning. His expression was tight, shoulders rigid. "Emily," he said, his voice slightly higher than normal, "I need to discuss your workload. There have been concerns about reporting inconsistencies. I expect full transparency." I nodded slowly, keeping my calm. "Of course, Mr. Carter." He lingered, eyes narrowing. "I trust you understand how important discretion is. Rumors can be very damaging." "Yes, sir," I said softly, the weight of all my collected evidence pressing behind my calm tone. After the meeting, James sidled up to me in the hallway. "He's panicking," he whispered. "Every move he makes now is reactive. He's slipping, Emily. Keep him on the ropes." The next day, Carter made a critical error. In his rush to cover tracks, he sent an internal email to the entire department, highlighting recent payroll concerns and asking for employees to double-check hours worked and reported. The email, intended as a subtle warning, only exposed him further. It confirmed discrepancies he had tried to hide for months. I couldn't help a small smile. The labor board's presence had him scrambling, and each frantic move made the case against him stronger. Maya caught my eye during lunch. She leaned close, whispering, "You're doing it. You're actually doing it. He can't control you anymore." I nodded. "And we're just getting started." That evening, I stayed late, finalizing a detailed packet of evidence for the labor board. Time cards, emails, notes from colleagues who had quietly confided, everything meticulously organized. The stack of papers felt like a weapon, sharp and unyielding. Before leaving, I checked my phone. A message from an unknown number. "We see what you're doing. Don't stop. Carter deserves this." I didn't know who sent it, but it didn't matter. Allies were everywhere, even unseen. The tide had turned, and Carter's control over the office was slipping like sand through fingers. Driving home, the city lights blurred in the rain-soaked streets. Instead of fear, I felt exhilaration. The man who once towered over us, who had stolen our time and energy, was now vulnerable. His arrogance had blinded him. His cruelty had fueled me, and now, justice was creeping closer with every passing day. Tomorrow, the labor board would begin direct contact. He would start feeling real pressure, the kind that shakes even the most confident manipulators. And I would be ready, calm, organized, and determined. Because once the first crack appears, the rest of the structure begins to crumble, and Carter's empire of exploitation was about to collapse. If you were in Emily's position, would you feel nervous celebrating small victories, or would you use them to push forward even harder? The following week, the labor board's investigation moved into full swing. Carter's once commanding presence faltered as auditors requested documentation, cross-checked payroll records, and asked pointed questions. Every step he had relied on to maintain control was now being dismantled before his eyes. From my desk, I could see him pacing. His tie loosened slightly, his hands gripping the edges of his desk like he was trying to hold on to the last shreds of authority. Emails flew back and forth at lightning speed, each one defensive, each one a mistake under the careful scrutiny of the labor board. James leaned over one afternoon, whispering, "He's making errors faster than I've ever seen. It's like he's unraveling in real time." I nodded silently. Every move he made added weight to the case, and the evidence I had meticulously collected was now part of a larger storm. Carter's attempts to intimidate staff had backfired. Witnesses were coming forward cautiously, confident in the support of the labor board. Then came the meeting that would mark the real turning point. Carter was called into a conference room with labor board officials. I didn't hear the conversation, but the tension radiated through the floor. When he returned, his face was pale, jaw tight, eyes darting nervously. He tried to act as if nothing had happened, but the staff noticed. Emails became terse, calls were avoided, and his usual confidence was replaced by a thin veneer of control that everyone could see through. That night, I stayed late again, compiling follow-up documents, double-checking every entry, ensuring that nothing could be disputed. I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. For months, I had been trapped in a world where my time and effort were stolen, and now, slowly but surely, the balance was shifting. Maya appeared at my cubicle as I packed up. "It's happening," she said softly. "He's finally feeling it." "Yes," I whispered back, staring at my folder. "Every stolen hour, every threat, every attempt to intimidate us, he's going to answer for it." James gave me a small smile. "You did this. All of us are finally breathing easier because of you." It was strange to feel pride in the midst of fear. Carter was dangerous, manipulative, and unpredictable, but the truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it was buried. And now, under the labor board's watchful eye, his lies and deception were exposed like cracks in glass. Driving home, I thought about all the late nights, the whispered strategies with allies, the constant anxiety that had defined the past months. None of it mattered now, because progress was undeniable. The walls were closing in on him, and every move he made only tightened the net. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would watch him falter even more. Every lie he had told, every hour he had stolen would count against him. And when the final decision came, there would be no escape, no manipulation, no threats, only justice. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine freedom, not just for me, but for everyone who had been exploited under his reign. The office might still hum with keyboards and ringing phones, but the balance had shifted. Carter's empire was beginning to crumble. If you were Emily, would you confront Carter with the labor board's findings directly, or let the process unfold quietly to maximize impact? The day the labor board finalized their investigation, the office felt tense, like the calm before a storm. Carter arrived early, his usual swagger replaced by a jittery stiffness. Emails piled up, phones rang, but his responses were curt, defensive, and desperate. The walls he had built around himself were cracking, and he could feel it. By mid-morning, HR called a meeting. Carter entered the conference room first, attempting to maintain authority, but the labor board official, Ms. Ramirez, walked in moments later. Her presence was calm, professional, and unyielding. The staff watched silently as the two forces faced each other, the manipulative boss and the legal authority he could no longer ignore. Ms. Ramirez laid out the findings in clear, factual language. Hours had been stolen. Time cards had been altered. Emails, logs, and witness statements confirmed systematic denial of overtime pay. The evidence was undeniable. Carter's face went pale. His hands trembled slightly as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. When it was over, Ms. Ramirez turned to the staff. All employees affected will receive back pay, including overtime and penalties for delays. Compliance procedures will be implemented immediately. Any retaliation will not be tolerated. A quiet cheer rippled through the room. Some whispered congratulations. Some wiped away tears of relief. I sat back, stunned, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. Months of stress, fear, and careful planning had led to this moment. Carter attempted to speak, his voice shaky. I wasn't aware. Ms. Ramirez interrupted firmly. Awareness is irrelevant. The law is clear. The company will comply fully or face further legal consequences. He slumped back into his chair, defeated. The aura of invincibility he had carried for years was gone. He was just a man, cornered by truth and accountability. After the meeting, my colleagues approached me quietly, thanking me. Maya hugged me tightly, whispering, "We finally feel free." James clapped me on the back, his grin sheepish but genuine. "You did it, Emily." "You actually did it," I smiled, feeling a wave of relief and triumph. But beneath it all, there was a quiet pride, not just for myself, but for the people who had supported me in silence. We had reclaimed our power. Carter had underestimated us all, and his greed had been his undoing. Later that evening, I sat at home, reviewing the final documents. Checks were being processed. Policies were being rewritten. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel the gnawing tension of fear. I felt peace. I thought back to the long nights, the whispered strategies, the careful collection of evidence. Every risk, every late hour, every flicker of anxiety had been worth it. Justice had been served, not through rage, but through persistence, courage, and unwavering resolve. As I closed my laptop, I realized something. Standing up for yourself isn't just about one battle. It's about proving that exploitation can be challenged, that greed has limits, and that courage, even quiet, patient courage, can topple even the most imposing adversaries. Carter would never forget this lesson, and neither would anyone else watching. The office would continue, emails would still ping, reports would still be due, but the balance had shifted permanently. The thief of time had been caught. The powerless had reclaimed their voice, and I finally could breathe. If you were in Emily's shoes, how would you use this victory to inspire others facing unfair treatment at work?